Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is my friend Charlotte Dennett, and Charlotte has written books about oil pipelines, and she wants to do an interview with me about what's the real end game in Gaza. Well, Charlotte, you put the news on and you see all this horrific stuff, all these people that are, you know, not doing too well. Um, Ultimately, from your perspective, what will happen?
Well, you see, President Biden, for example, often refers to our strategic relationship with Israel, and he says that it's in America's strategic interests
Hmm.
to defend Israel. Um, and it's true. And what I show in my book um, is that this strategic partnership actually it goes even farther back than World War II. I was going to say that from FDR on to the present,
Hmm.
presidents have been held hostage to oil companies. Okay, but I need to refine that and say it goes back to World War One and
Okay,
President
do you have
Wilson.
a copy of your book that you could show?
Yeah, yeah. Here it is.
Right.
Does that come out backwards? I don't know. On my
Oh,
end, it
it's
does.
good. It's good.
Us, yeah. Follow the pipelines. Um, Uncovering the mystery of a lost spy, that would be my father, and the deadly politics of the great game for oil. So I have looked at this huge conflict from a geopolitical perspective, which hardly ever gets mentioned in the mainstream media. There are some more sophisticated pundits who understand that most world leaders look at this from a geopolitical perspective, and that it's about resources, and the primary resource everybody knows it's oil, right? Everybody knows there's oil in the Middle East, but it's never explained how the petropowers are actually having an influence on these endless wars. So I want to go back. First of all, I would encourage your followers to get out a map. Get out a map that shows Israel, Gaza, Lebanon, Syria. And what you're going to see is that all those countries border the Eastern Mediterranean Sea. All right. When I first went to Lebanon as a reporter in 1975, I'd been told that it was the gateway to the Middle East. But I soon discovered that oil companies and their heads look at it differently. And they say it as a gateway to Middle East oil. So get out a map and you will see, and it's also on the cover of my book, by the way. I did this on purpose. Maybe you can see it right here. You see these lines like this and this? All right. These two pipelines carried Iraqi oil to Lebanon and to Haifa, Palestine. They were built in the 30s, but they were conceived during World War One. And the whole idea in World War One, from the British point of view, was to make getting the oil of Iraq a first-class war aim. And that happened to coincide, and this is going to shock some people, that happened to coincide with the Balfour Declaration of 1917, in which Lord Balfour, who was the former head of the Foreign Affairs, he simply wrote a letter. And most people don't know who he wrote the letter to. He wrote the letter to Sir Walter de Rothschild, scion of the huge banking and oil empire in Europe. And it was recognizing the need and the right for a Jewish state in Palestine. But what's not explained is their understanding that they needed that Jewish state to protect the oil the oil pipeline that was going to terminate in Haifa and Lebanon. Both of them, the Haifa part was controlled by the British after World War I. There was a British mandate, and the southern pipeline, wait, the northern one was to Lebanon, the southern one was to Haifa, and the northern one was controlled by the French, the southern one was by the British. And so why don't you hear about this? Even up to now, it's because oil is the fuel of the military. It continues to be the fuel of the military. And yet, every president that may have overseen a war in the Middle East is reluctant to say oil has anything to do with it, because what mother wants to send her kid off to war if it's to profit the oil companies? That angle is not going to work. So pretexts are always invented to justify intervention in the Middle East, regime changes, assassination attempts, and now look at the horrific situation we are in right now. So and I have followed this all the way through history. The reason I followed it was because I wanted to understand what was behind the plane crash that killed my father after his top secret mission to Saudi Arabia. This was in 47. And he was head of counterintelligence for the United States Central Intelligence Group, the immediate predecessor of the CIA. He had been sent over there to determine what would be the safest route for the Trans-Arabian pipeline, which was huge at the time. And when he wrote his marching orders, his analysis of the work he was going to do, he wrote in a document I got declassified, 1943, his main mission was, quote unquote, to protect the oil at all costs. And what I have learned is that protecting the oil means military, right? And what I have also learned is that whereas I have shown in many of my pipeline maps, for instance, the invasion of Iraq, the first place that the troops went to were to protect oil installations. But what I came to conclude is that whereas in some countries there are military outposts to protect oil, like in Afghanistan, I can go into that later. That was a lot about so energy could flow south. That was the real reason for the invasion of Afghanistan. But in the case of Israel, it suddenly hit me that the military outpost to protect Saudi oil was not in Saudi Arabia. It was Israel itself. This explains why Israel has more money coming to it and more armaments than any other country, millions of dollars worth every single year. And what's going on right now is just a continuation. It's still going on at all costs, to the point where it's Israel at all costs. Israel has become a death trap. It's become a death trap for Jews and Arabs. Jews are not safe now because of Netanyahu's crazy policy. So what is it that Netanyahu has wanted to do? Yeah, finally getting into the present, or me actually a little bit past, because I found out that Netanyahu was a big cheerleader of George Bush's invasion of Iraq. He made this statement right after the troops start going into Iraq. He says, soon the oil will be flowing to Haifa. And that was Iraqi oil that had once flowed through one of those pipelines that I showed you on the cover of my book. It was later closed during the 48 War for Independence. He wanted it reopened. And he thought it was not a pipe dream. It was, because the main guy that he wanted to oversee this was going to replace Saddam Hussein, was a man named Ahmed Chalabi. And Chalabi was the guy who created weapons of mass destruction as the pretext for going into Iraq. So now let's fast forward. Netanyahu, at various times, he was either finance minister or prime minister. But I believe it was when he was finance minister, he was in charge of the first incursion into Gaza, a military operation. And the purpose of it, and this was in 2009, was to prevent, get this, prevent the Gazans, Palestinians, from developing this huge new oil and natural gas field that was found off the coast of Gaza. It's also off the coast of Israel. And these discoveries were made in 2000 and then even a bigger one in 2010 in what is called the Leviathan field. So at present, there is $500 billion worth of oil and natural gas sitting off the coast of Israel, Gaza, and Lebanon. And these these wars that Netanyahu's been engaging in 2009, 2014, and now is to keep the oil and natural gas out of the hands of the Palestinians so Israel can develop it, and has succeeded in that so far. And now the idea, well, actually, it's been the idea all along, is to develop an energy corridor so that this oil and natural gas can be shipped to Europe, which is now in serious need of energy because of the Ukraine war. That's a whole nother discussion we can have. But once you quote unquote follow the pipelines, and that would include the Nord Stream 2 pipeline that was sabotaged, that was supplying Russian oil to Europe. Once you follow the pipelines, things start to make sense. The thing that's going on right before October 7th was an extension of the so-called Abraham Accords that were trying to normalize relationship between Israel and several Arab Gulf states. And now it's become the India Middle East Corridor Project. What is this? This is to run a link between India is underwater to Saudi Arabia. And again, if you look at the map, that'll make sense. And then they're going to run, guess what? A natural gas pipeline that, to my mind, when I look at the map, it looks like it is running parallel to that original tap line that I show in this book. This is it, okay? That's tap line that eventually ended in southern Lebanon, not Israel, because there was too much conflict going on. This is in the right before 1948, the creation of the state of Israel, but it's still going on, and that's what they want to do. And this will help explain, in my opinion, why the Biden administration has basically allowed Israel to get away with what it's doing. I mean, this is
Okay, let
terrible.
me ask you a question.
Yeah, yeah,
You're saying that this whole thing is for the military, right?
yeah,
All
yeah.
the these countries that are involved, like the United States, Israel, right? Would they Are they foolish enough to risk a nuclear holocaust over oil?
Good question. We are at the precipice. This is insane. Um, the one thing that might give them pause, so even if Israel were to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities, and by the way, that's what Netanyahu wants. The Biden administration is urging restraint, but the far right in Israel wants to eliminate Iran altogether. Um, there's going to be nuclear fallout. Come on, it's going to blow back right into Israel. So, but yeah, I was asking why would Biden risk his legacy as Genocide Joe? And now there's tremendous pressure on on Biden. I mean, on Kamala Harris, who initially expressed her I think genuine concern for what's going on in Gaza, but she's towing the line now. And I don't know how independent she's going to be. But
Charlotte,
Netanyahu, but what? Just let me say, under Trump, it would be much worse. It would be very scary, and that's why all these generals are coming out denouncing him as a danger.
Okay, so when you talk about the people in the government, people running for office, they know that the risks are there, but yet they're doing it. Why?
Well, one thing they all realize, you see, they have these big development plans. I mean, it's prime real estate facing the Mediterranean. Jared Kushner once said, "Oh, this is going to be great for hotel development or waterfront development." He told that to Harvard recently. Um, but the one thing they all know is no bank will finance any infrastructure project, and that means roads, railroads, pipelines. They won't finance them if there's unrest. And of course, that makes absolute sense. I mean, who could blame them? So, in order to facilitate the protection, the protection of the infrastructure, what Netanyahu's doing is he's totally flattening Gaza. He is called for its demilitarization, its destruction, and the removal of all the Palestinians. Get them into some place in the Negev desert, and that way peace can be established. And what happened is, first of all, Hamas saw the writing on the wall, especially with the development of the Abraham Accords, um, trying to normalize relationship with Israel. And so I think they're just waiting to let it happen. And Biden can call for restraint and there's got to be a ceasefire, but he still supplies the arms. And of course, then there's the problem that the Democratic Party has, which is heavily dependent on very wealthy Jewish donors. I mean, this has long been known and has a great impact on Biden foreign policy. But what if we got a choice between if Netanyahu wins this election, he'll just do anything Netanyahu wants. There will be no restraints. And they're very close. Netanyahu is a family friend of the Kushners, okay, who are Jewish.
Right.
I mean, in that sense, it all makes sense. So we have a horrific tragedy in the making. I mean, the news out of Lebanon is horrible. The Lebanese have suffered a civil war, 1975 to 1990, killed 100,000 people, and has suffered two invasions by Israel. The second one was in 2006, and that's when Hezbollah rose to power because it was the only armed group that fought the Israelis. The Lebanese government is headed by Christians. It's all broken down to different sectarian groups. The Christians have the presidency, the Sunni Muslims have the prime ministership, and the Shiites have the speakership, I believe. The Shiites are in the south, and they're poor. They are among the less affluent Lebanese, and they saw Hezbollah rising to the occasion and actually succeeded in pushing Israel out of Lebanon. And so that's how Hezbollah gained influence. And now it's a political power. It holds seats in parliament. It offers health care and provides, necessary food for the people there. That's why Hezbollah was supported. Anyway,
Let me ask you this. If there was somebody in Israel with a cooler head than Netanyahu, would we be in the mess we're in right now?
uh, I, you know, it's so hard to predict. Um, we're in a bigger mess. We're in a bigger mess now because Netanyahu and Trump are in cahoots. Netanyahu knows that the United States is beset by political divisions. Biden had to resign. The U.S. looks weak. This is the time to move, and that's why he has ignored all calls for restraint. Had it been somebody else, um, I actually think that Biden and his foreign policy apparatus, they kept calling for the establishment of a Palestinian state, and that this would be the only way that peace could come to the Middle East. But the point is that Israel under Netanyahu has almost made that impossible now. I mean, Gaza's flattened. There is ethnic cleansing, genocide, ethnic cleansing going on. The Palestinians are being forced out. The West Bank is under siege by settlers, and this is an overall plan. So it's hard to say. I think that the calculus that bringing economic development to the region via the Abraham Accords, which Biden, it was started by Trump and Kushner, and Biden is extending it, but I think it's naive to think that just bringing economic development in the region is going to cause peace, because what they've done is they've just created millions of more recruits, and they know that it's just insane.
Mm.
How this conflict, which ultimately divides Arabs and Jews, And what I'm trying to do is say, look at the geopolitical reality. They can't seem to stop themselves from going after oil. The great game is still going on, you know? Until we have a military that no longer relies on oil, and maybe it relies on nuclear, and how nuclear submarines. I mean, how dangerous is that? And even after the oil wars, there are going to be lithium wars. Ukraine has huge deposits of lithium in its eastern region, for instance, and plus the largest deposits of natural gas and oil in Europe next to Russia. If you consider Russia part of Europe, that's an energy war. Control over the Donbass. Um, they're so powerful. The oil companies are so incredibly powerful, but they're the ones that I hold responsible. And you would think that all the people that are concerned about oil's contribution to climate change, and actively exposing that and exposing the lies, but they have a problem coming to grips with the fact that it's the oil companies that are behind the endless wars. I mean, it's
Mm.
the same thing. So I can't say how it's going to end up. It doesn't look real good because Netanyahu's getting away with murder. And of course, he's trying to stay out of jail. And so is Trump. So they have mutual interests. And, Trump has made it very clear that that the Palestinians have to be wiped out. I mean, he's telling Jews, American Jews, that they're stupid if they don't vote for him.
Mhm.
This is not good for Israel. And there have been some very brave people who've spoken out about it. The editor of Jewish Currents being one of them. And I'm trying to think of what's his name, but I can't right now. Anyway, they're saying this is not going to end well for Israel. It's gone beyond the pale. So
Mm.
let's see. Is there anything else I can add to the conversation? I saw you yawning. Did you have a bad night last night, Cynthia?
I uh, I wake up a lot during the night.
So do I. I
Mm.
do not sleep well. Got a lot on my mind. But anyway. Oh yeah, and then the Saudis. The Saudis want to develop their nuclear power. And they've been in discussion with the Biden administration about that. They have huge uranium deposits. things that worries Biden is that the Chinese are helping the Saudis develop the uranium. So the great game is still going on. A lot of this, a lot of Biden's um, efforts to to be to have some measure of a ceasefire. I think he really did want it so that their plans could go through, and Netanyahu's ruining it. But he's always got his eye on Iran, China,
Hmm.
Russia, and they're all joining. That we're seeing entangling alliances like on steroids right now. So he's got to, well, not Biden, now Harris has to consider, well, what are we going to do about the Chinese? They're making huge inroads throughout the Middle East and uh, Eastern Asia, and that's through the Belt and Road Initiative that China's doing. It used to be called the New Silk Road. This was a project the Americans had of, developing infrastructure. But the Chinese have gotten in ahead of time, and they're very active in the Middle East. They're very active in Africa. So how are we going to get out of this terrible fix we're in, the great game? If it's not going to be for oil, it'll be for uranium and lithium. Not a
Well,
happy prognosis.
maybe ultimately only the cockroaches will be walking the earth.
Well, that's sad, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
now I'm trying to think of what the prophecies were. Weren't there prophecies of Armageddon in the Middle East?
Uh-huh.
I mean, it seems like we're getting closer and closer because all you need is one stupid move, one
Right.
accidental bombing, um, and off we go. We're off and running. So here's one prediction I'll make.
Okay.
Israel will not attack Iran until after the election. That's a prediction.
Okay. Okay.
They it's they're gonna have freer reign if Trump is in. And of course, all Trump does is lie like crazy. I mean, the reason there are so many Americans that support Trump is because they're being fed lies constantly, constant lies through Fox TV and through Trump and through X, and so that's why there is so much support for this convicted felon, rapist, crook. Um, you know. So many of us are worried if Trump gets in because he's made very clear what he's going to do. He's going to sick the military on his opponents and all those Marxists and he calls them Marxists and fascists and so on. He just, yeah, it's
So we just have what, 12 days to go?
yeah, 12 days to go.
Okay. So
And go ahead.
after the election, let's have another conversation on your thoughts.
Yeah, well, we'll see. It's not going to end, is it? Because if it's close, then Trump will say that they stole the election.
Okay.
And yeah, so well, we'll come back and see what happens. But right now, it's so dire, it's so awful. You know, Netanyahu's preventing food from getting in to Gaza. That's been known now and established. And the hospitals can't work. Um, so patients can't even be treated. I mean, how much longer do we have to watch genocide on TV? Genocide and ethnic
Right.
cleansing, and no one does anything to stop it.
Oh, well, let's talk about this after the election.
Okay,
Okay.
you're on. If we're still
So,
alive, I'm joking, but it's
so
serious.
you've been listening to Charlotte Dennett. Hold up your book again, Charlotte.
All right. Here it is. Follow the pipelines. There's like 10 pipeline maps in there. Okay. So you just read the captions on the maps and you'll understand what's in the book. I said it was a tinderbox waiting to happen after all that oil and gas was found off the shores of Israel. Now look where we at.
And I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Issues That Matter. So if you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and please follow me on Twitter. I will have the Twitter handle in the caption. Charlotte, thank you. Thank you everybody for listening. And Charlotte and I will have another conversation in just a few weeks. Have a good day, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you.